Five.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of NenTot Tuesday. We're going to be talking with the Natural Resource Conservation Service today about some conservation planning and results of the Tolchacket Soil Survey, Ecological Survey that was completed earlier this year. I've got Michael Sosa, John, and Jessica with us. And so let's go ahead and start us out, Michael or Mike.
Okay. Sure thing. Thank you very much, Mo. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, which is always the biggest issue with doing live presentations over the internet. Okay, so if you guys can see it, just give me a thumbs up or something so you know, and then I'll continue on. Okay, great. So like Mo said, my name is Michael Sousa. I was the Tolchacket Survey project lead, and I'm just here today to talk to you guys and give you a brief introduction to what we accomplished, how we accomplished it, and kind of where it led us and where we're at now. Okay, so the 2021 survey update was State of Alaska requested update to bring the legacy data, which was roughly from 1980 up to the current standards. So you can see this red outline here on the map. This corner here, the confluence of these rivers is Nenana proper. The red outline is going to be the larger soil survey that this area is a part of. And this whole area was originally surveyed around 1980. And this yellow outline here is the 33,000 acre update area, which we focused our efforts on in the summer of 2021 and have been working on through the remainder of 2022 to get this data published for the public. So our goals were to verify legacy concepts and adjust as required. Some of the things we expected to see out there was differences in the soils and the ecology based on recent fire history and potential near surface permafrost degradation. So this is currently in final review with NRCS state soil staff. This is actually an old slide. I should have updated this, but this is published and this information is available to the public. And we're gonna get a little bit more into that in a second. So here's a zoomed in of the 33,000 acre update area. And I'm sure a lot of folks are very familiar with these phase one agricultural plot lines here in pink. And the blue dots on the map here are exactly where we gathered pet on location for or from this summer. And for those who don't know, pet on is just what we call exact point on the ground where we're going to dig a hole, take samples, and take notes for further analyzation, be it in the lab or in the office. So you can see that a lot of these dots are in some of these plot boundaries, and some of these plot boundaries don't have specific data points within them. A lot of this had to do with access or investigations of landscape landforms existing somewhere else that we could extrapolate to. And we made these decisions based off the previous soil survey maps and what was feasible for us to do in a single summer of fieldwork. So the end goal here was to use higher resolution data collected at most of these areas for targeted interpretations, mostly for agricultural purposes. So like I said, the field work was performed in 2021, and we investigated 165 point locations over roughly a 6-week timescale. And soil and plant data was collected. I'm sure a lot of you know what it's like out there. Some of the spots are really easy to walk, and some of them are completely contained by this blowdown here. This is one of our seasonal technicians that came up and worked with us in the field. He was actually from California and was probably really excited to go to Alaska and work in the mountains. And his first couple of weeks, he was out in Nenana busting through all the blowdown trees. I just wanted to kind of show you guys an in-depth view of what it is that we do. So we are digging these small mapping holes, maybe 8 to 10 inches in diameter. We're describing the different horizonations that you can see in the holes, looking for features that will tell us things about available water and other soil properties. And then we're writing these down on paper so we can develop like a larger concept for the area. So here's a picture of one of the most dominant soils in the update area, which is coined the Koyukuk soil. And the Koyukuk soil is described as a well-drained, silty soil. Okay, to the soil mapping. So just generally how these soil maps work is you're gonna get, the end product is going to be lines on a map with map unit symbols assigned to them. So it gets kind of confusing. I think a lot of people assume that we're providing pinpoint, this soil lives in this exact place for a whole area, when rather we're delineating the map out to classify landscapes and landforms and say something like this map unit 12 here is it gets a name for its major component that lives there, but there's also a chance that it has other smaller components within it. So rather than this being a one-to-one relationship between area to a soil, it's more like if you're in this map unit, you have this percentage likelihood of having this soil and these percentage likelihoods of having these other soils. And all these soil maps or surveys will produce long, extensive outlines of exactly what these percentage soils look like, what their typical profiles look like, and some of their settings, and then even some of their properties as they pertain to agriculture or building or construction. One of the major things that happened with this update was the line work being adjusted. So you can see here in this picture on the left, you have, I don't know if this was from extremely legacy data set and lines didn't come over in the same or the correct way, but some of these lines were just shifted a little bit. So we went through by hand and moved these lines to better capture the aerial imagery and go with the difference in elevations out there. So what you can't see on these images is the high resolution elevation data that was also used to move these lines around. Okay, so something that everybody is very interested in is the land capability class maps for this area. I just zoomed in on a small portion. Unfortunately, Web Soil Survey won't allow me to overlay the agricultural plot boundaries, but this is around the phase 1 area, and this is the legacy data. So what we saw generally was a shift from a land capability class 4 soil to a land capability class 3 soil, this being the new updated map. And this is just something now that the data is available on Web Soil Survey that anybody can go in and produce. Myself, Mo, and a couple other folks within the Wasilla office actually extracted some of this data and appended it to a custom map. So we could create something like this that has the plot boundaries with an overlay of the LCCs. And these custom maps are definitely possible if you ever run into a situation where Web Soil Survey just isn't doing what you want, or you have questions and you just can't seem to get it to answer the question you're asking. We definitely have support and we can help you out with those things. Just a quick little talk on land capability class for the project area. So overall, we saw a general shift towards more capable for the soils within the update boundary, meaning they went from LCC 4 to an LCC 3. And some of the potential reasons could be updated calculations for erosivity and plant water availability, and many other variables when compared to legacy classifications that are ran now that weren't in the past. Climatic factor changes from the legacy data and multiple large fire events in the area, most recently in 2009. The take home here is that while I wasn't around in 1980 and I'm not exactly sure what the previous soil scientists were using to assign these LCCs, the current LCCs are based on actual data that was collected in the field last summer. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to give you guys a live demo of Web Soil Survey, but I created these step-by-step slides that I will send off to John. So if this doesn't work for some reason, we can just go through it like this and they'll be available for people in the future. Okay, so I'm going to move over to my web page. And if you guys can give me a thumbs up again when you see this, that would be great.
I appreciate you daring to do this live.
Yeah, it's risky, but I think this gives a little bit better show of how it works.
Yes, thank you.
So the state, Mo, has made all of these plot parcel boundaries available online. It's very easy. All you need to do is Google NenTot, and it's the very first link. So we'll click on this. You get this beautiful web page with a picture much better than the one on my opening slide of the area. We're going to click cancel on here. Then we're going to scroll down to about halfway down the page. You'll see a header that says soils right here. And then right here, neatly listed are all the plot boundary parcel IDs. So I'm just going to grab one of these at random. I can just click on any one of these, 42182 here. I'm going to save this to my computer. My downloads automatically just go into this folder called downloads. They're pretty reasonable sized files, so this shouldn't be something that's going to take you 30 minutes or it's going to crash your computer. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just go to a different tab, or you can re-navigate the NenTot page to Web Soil Survey. I'm going to click on the very first link that pops up. Big green Start Web Soil Survey button. I'll let this load so I don't confuse it. So this should be the homepage of Web Soil Survey. Unfortunately, it centers on the lower 48 and not Alaska, but we'll fix that when we import our area of interest here. So I'm going to click this down arrow for area of interest, create area of interest from a zip shape file. So now I'm just going to navigate to that file that I just downloaded from the NenTot Track It page. I'm going to click Set AOI. And this is going to zoom us in on an area. I got to move you guys this little screens here. This is going to zoom us in to an exact parcel boundary for whatever one I downloaded from the webpage. I can't remember 42128. 421828. And this basically is just telling Web Soil Survey, this is the boundary I care about. These are the data inside here that I want to know more about. And these are already pre-set up, so you don't have to go in here and make any custom boxes or anything like that. You can just import this directly. So now that I have this area of interest set, I can just click over here to soil data map or soil map. And this will show me the general soil map lines that I showed you guys in the very first beginning of this presentation, where you'll have numbers inside polygons, and then these numbers will correlate to a map unit symbol over here. So where the real money is made and what people really like to see are the interpretations. So you can just skip right over this soil map thing and just go right to the Data Explorer tab if you'd like. And inside here, there are a ton of different interpretations for pretty much anything that you would be curious about as it pertains to soil. Now, I'm not exactly sure how a lot of these interpretations are calculated. Each interpretation does have a pretty good description of what it's telling you and what the different values mean. But if you have more questions about exactly how it's coming up with some of these values, feel free to reach out to us. So the one that I want to show you most is land classification. This is going to be the non-irrigated capability class, which is a general interpretation we used to talk about maybe how productive a soil could be for farming purposes under a non-irrigated program. So I can just click the down arrow here, click view rating. And I'll get this map that has different colors that show me what the ratings for each one of these map units are. And this description is the one I was talking about earlier. This will show me right here exactly what class 3 means and what class 4 means. And then there's even a little legend here that you can pop out that will tell you what the colors mean if you don't want to scroll down and match the numbers up. Another interesting interpretation that Mo wanted me to cover that I think is great too is the permafrost sensitivity. I believe it's under land management. Permafrost sensitivity. There's so many interpretations in here. Sometimes I get lost in Web Soil Survey. So I can do the same thing for this parcel for permafrost sensitivity. I can pop the legend out. It'll tell me what these colors mean. None or no permafrost in these areas. Potential moderate permafrost in this small little portion of this, this boundary. And then if I go down here, it'll give me more information about each one of these. So the cool thing about Web Soil Survey is once you find a couple of these that you really like, I can click add to shopping cart. And then I can go in here and say, I want to do construction material or let's see, land classification, soil moisture class. I can open up another one. I can add this to my shopping cart. And then once you're done, once you go through here and you add everything that you're interested in to your shopping cart, you just click this little tab here, shopping cart free. And this will prompt you to either immediately download it through this checkout button, or if it is a large file, it may have you type your email address in so it can compile it and send you a link to download it later. I've noticed for this entire area, it takes maybe 5 minutes for it to send you an email, so it's still fairly quick. Let's see if this will download. If it doesn't, I have an example of what they look like I can show you. Okay. So this is the report that it'll spit out, and it pretty much gives you everything you need to make sense of the numbers that it's giving you. And it gives you just a brief overview of what soil survey is, how it's completed, some of its history, the contents, and how to use these soil survey maps. So this is an extremely useful tool. I understand that it can be kind of clunky at times, and it maybe is a little bit difficult for folks to get into Web Soil Survey and create some of these products for themselves. But just remember that NRCS is available at any time to help. You guys, I'll have my email here on this next slide, and you can feel free to answer or message me with any questions you have. So again, I will send this step-by-step outline here to John and Mo, and they'll be able to get that into your guys' hands if you have questions. With that, I think I'm going to shift it over to John, and he's going to talk a little bit about conservation planning.
Yeah, just for a second, there was a question about getting these slides, and yes, I will make them available email to the apparent high bidders. And then if anybody else out in Facebook land would like a copy of those slides, either contact me or you just had his email, he can send you that directly too.
Yep, and I'll keep this up for just a couple seconds if people want to write it down. This is my personal number, but you guys should feel free to call anytime. And then with that, I will switch it to John. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Am I coming through all right on the microphone here? All right. That was neat to see that recently released product. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and hopefully you'll see my title slide. Is that working?
Yes, it is.
All right. So Mike and I both work for USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, but a little bit different divisions where he's out there mapping soils and helping us to understand. I work more in our conservation planning division where I'm working directly with landowners and using some of that valuable soil information to help people make good decisions on their land. So I started with NRCS in Idaho Falls, Idaho in 2006, and I moved here to Fairbanks in 2010, and I worked as a conservation planner in Fairbanks for about 10 years. And then in the last couple of years, I've been working less directly with landowners and working more with our conservation planners on some quality assurance and training and technical support with our planning tools. So in September, we got a new office lead. His name is Brad Yothers, and he came to Fairbanks from Winnemucca, Nevada, I believe is the office he was in as an office leader. But before that, he was a conservation planner in our Kenai office. So he comes to us with experience of how things work in Alaska, and a lot of the processes here. So we're excited that he's here with us. And for the Nenana Tocheket area, he'll be your primary contact at this point. And I'll give you his information at the end of my presentation. So a little background on who we are. We are under the Department of Agriculture, part of the federal government. And our motto is helping people help the land. And I think that's just a pretty good summation of what we do. We work with farmers, ranchers, forest managers. Basically, if you are on private land and you're engaged in the production of food or fiber, we want to work with you to protect the natural resources on your land. And I have here, we work exclusively on private land, and it does include tribal land. A slight exception to that is there are times that somebody might have a agricultural operation that includes some public land through a lease or something, and we definitely don't want to ignore that and pretend that cows disappear if they go over onto that lease land or something. So we do definitely factor that in our planning. A little bit of history about the agency. It was founded in 1935 during the Dust Bowl. Originally, we were the Soil Conservation Service. I think the very first name was the Soil Erosion Service. That was a little misleading because we're in the business of conservation, not eroding. And then in 1994, the name changed to the Natural Resources Conservation Service to better reflect a more holistic look at natural resources on the landscape. We expanded because things aren't, the soil isn't in a vacuum, and it's very well connected to lots of other natural resources. So I'll go into a little bit more about the different resources that we look at. And in Hugh Hammond Bennett, I believe I saw this, I don't remember if I saw it on the Ken Burns documentary, The Dust Bowl, but if you haven't seen that, it's a pretty neat history on kind of how our agency got started. But I think I heard that when he was testifying for the need of the Soil Conservation Service, that a dust storm actually brought dust from the Great Plains into Washington while he was there talking, and it made a pretty clear point then. So last week, I think you got to meet some of the folks from the Fairbanks Soil Water Conservation District. We work with conservation districts. They provide the local guidance and leadership to our efforts. And my office before moving here was very close to the Texas-Mexico border. And I don't think this was on purpose, but I went to the Sustainable Ag Conference soon after arriving. And I remember hearing somebody say, just don't tell us how they do it in Texas. And I think that's important, that that there's local guidance on what we do in our conservation planning. And between Joni's experience working with farmers and Dan and Aaliyah, they bring a whole bunch of experience, a whole bunch of local knowledge that helps to guide, to make sure we're not just moving into town and assuming we know what's going on locally. In one of my early trainings, somebody told me that you should be ready if you were ever invited to be on the Tonight Show or the Late Show or anything like that, to talk about what you do. And I found that a little ridiculous. I have not gotten an invitation yet, but maybe Facebook Live is the closest thing I'll get. So I did think about that though. If I had to explain what I do and make it pretty quick, and so I'll give you just kind of my just real short description of my job and what we do. And if you think back to grade school, this little figure might look familiar. Sometimes you would see a little diagram of the water cycle and how water moves through the environment, or the nitrogen cycle, or the carbon cycle. And it's just a way to describe how things are very connected. And then starting to study natural resources and knowing that they're all connected, you start hearing people talk about the biogeochemical cycle, because there's chemicals in the environment, or elements in the environment, and they interact with the earth and living things. It's all pretty well connected. And so in a natural setting, a lot of those things are kind of in a natural balance. When you think about the soil providing a place for plants to grow, and the soil provides nutrients and holds the water. Well, the plants in turn provide protection for the soil. They provide cover for the ground, and they keep the soil in place. And leaves that fall from trees get cycled back into the soil. So when we pursue our goals on the land, especially if we're moving into agriculture or grazing, sometimes we disrupt some of those cycles, and there are some impacts on the land that we can mitigate. And so I think that's where we come in, is when you're out there working on the land, you have your goals, but at times there are opportunities to make sure that we're taking care of our natural resources. And the word conservation, it acknowledges that you're out there doing things on the land. We're not engaged in preservation, where we're trying to put it exactly back to some kind of unaltered state. So working with NRCS, it's entirely voluntary. We work with you, as I mentioned, to achieve your goals, but also to take care of the natural resources on your land. And we do this at all scales, large and small operations. We work pretty close to our office here in Fairbanks with some landowners, and we travel around different parts of the state. I think a big part of our work is on-site consultations. Every piece of land is unique. Every landowner and land manager is unique in what they're doing, and that combination is important. And so, so we seek to provide our assistance in person and on the land. And there are times that I, as a conservation planner, might feel like I need a little more backup in certain areas or certain land uses. So we have a staff of experts within the state where our conservation planners can turn for more information or more guidance about grazing land, about crop production, about biology, about forestry. So, and when we do our planning, we go through a 9-step process that's been kind of set out, and it's a big part of our training. And so I'll just kind of flip through those quickly with you. The first one is to identify problems and opportunities. And this is usually, this first problem or opportunity is what might bring you to our door or establish our working relationship. And an important next step is determining your objectives, because your objectives are going to shape what you do. And for us to try to work with you on a plan without acknowledging those, it's going to be set up for failure. So it's important, for you to communicate with a conservation planner about what your long-term goals are, and maybe you have some more short-term objectives, things you want to accomplish. And so the more you share, the better your plan is going to be. We then go out and inventory the resources on your land, and we have some broad categories of resources, and underneath each of these we have some pretty specific things that we look at, things that have been worked on and discovered in the past in other operations. And so we have even a checklist that we can take out and things to look out for as we're out there on the land with you. The next step is to analyze resource data. Some things are pretty clear presence or absence out on the land. We can see things that are going on. Sometimes we use some further analysis to better understand what's going on the land. And we have some tools to help estimate erosion, because we can't be out there measuring it all the time. So we can use that to estimate what's going on, and we can also use it to test some different alternatives, which is our next step, formulate alternatives. We then evaluate with those alternatives, and ultimately it's the landowner or land manager that makes the decisions about what they do out on their land. And then next step is to implement the plan and evaluate it as you kind of look at the results after it's been completed. And then we often cycle back because things change and priorities change and conditions change. So I'm going to give you just a couple examples of how our conservation practices can be used to treat resource concerns. And these are not from Alaska. I apologize. For the picture is not 100% relevant, but these things are still applicable and do happen in Alaska. On the left, you can see an area that doesn't have great cover on the soil, and you can have a rain event or maybe some heavy irrigation where, when the soil is not protected, we experience erosion on the land. And like I mentioned, it's not just soil erosion. That sediment that gets into the runoff has impacts elsewhere. Wherever it's going, there are impacts. So this also affects water quality, both from the sediment, and if they were putting fertilizer on that field, there's potential for that fertilizer to get out off the field and into the water. An example of a conservation practice is on the right. This is either conservation tillage or a strip tillage where the disturbance on the land was minimized to keep the soil covered. This reduces the amount of water running off. It keeps the soil in place and improves the overall quality of the soil. And here's an example on grazing land. This is I think a pretty powerful image on the left of grass plants at different stages of grazing. Plants are kind of unique because if you were, say you were building a factory and you were producing a product, grass, your product is also your energy source for the factory. So if you have a factory and you're shipping off your product, you don't want to ship off your equipment to make it, but that's kind of what we deal with grass. The product for the animals to eat is the grass, but it's also the solar panel for the plant that maintains the roots below, and the roots bring up the water and the nutrients. So there's a certain level of use where you can maintain health for the plant and maintain good underground root production and everything like that. But if you go too low, you're going to start to affect the overall health of the plant. And a good rule of thumb I once heard is if you can see an animal's hooves while they're out on the grazing land, they've probably been there too long. And so, in an example below, there's a little better cover on the soil, provides a lot of the same benefits as the residue on the cropland, and maintains good productivity for the grass. So just overall, a conservation plan is a written record of those resource concerns that were identified in the planning process, and then your decisions on how to treat those. And this assistance is free of charge, and it's on a voluntary basis. And I said we do work with landowners on a voluntary basis, and we're not a regulatory agency. But I did want to point out one thing for you to keep in mind. We do have, with some of our practices and other USDA programs, there's the potential for financial assistance for doing work on the ground. And I think later you're going to hear from the Farm Service Agency, who also has some of their own programs. And part of this is, part of eligibility for some of our financial assistance is conservation compliance. And this started in 1985 under the Food Security Act. And they, at that time, realized that we had some still, even after years of assistance, providing assistance to landowners, there were still some pretty serious erosion concerns across the country. And there was also a bunch of conversion of wetlands into agricultural land going on, and an overall loss of wetlands in the nation. And so in 1985, Congress basically said, if you are going to participate in USDA programs, we need to keep that soil erosion to a minimal level. And so we have a way of looking at the soils on your land and determining how erodible it is, and then coming up with a plan to keep that erosion to a sustainable level. And then for wetlands, that involves a wetland determination and looking at the land. Some of this comes from the soil survey, but there's other factors involved in the overall wetland determination. And then if you're interested in receiving USDA funds, you need to make sure that those aren't converted, wetlands aren't converted for agricultural production. And one of the main actions that you might be thinking about is converting to agricultural production on a wetland would be stump removal. So I'm gonna give you our contact information.
John,
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about Alaska exempt wetlands that are wetlands that, you know, that can be converted? Can you speak to that at all?
I can speak to it a little bit. I'm not actually one of the folks with NRCS that do the wetland determinations, so I don't want to give too much information at risk of not giving the proper information. But yeah, as I understand it, there are in Alaska we have a lot of wetlands, and there are some areas that could technically classify as wetlands, but have a high potential for agricultural production, and may be considered an exempt wetland under the Food Security Act. And
I guess I just wanted the apparent high bidders or people who are engaging with the Natural Resource Conservation Service in Alaska to be aware, to ask that question: is this wetland possibly an Alaska exempt wetland? Because most people wouldn't know to ask. That's all I just wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah. So I think if you are interested in working with some of the USDA programs, I think just the earlier the better to get in touch with us and give us a call and start the process of determining that eligibility. And so this is how the state is broken up. The North team, as you see, Brad here in Fairbanks, in the Fairbanks office, covers a pretty good chunk of land in the northern part of the state. And this is some contact information for some of our other offices. And then here's the local contact information. I've got our website there at the top. And there's Brad Yother's contact information, his phone number and his email. And our office location, we are in Fairbanks near the intersection of University and Geist, if you'd like to stop by our office. Kind of up on the southwest corner of that intersection is the Wells Fargo Bank. And as you move south, you'll see the Oasis, then the Department of Environmental Conservation, and then we're the next building to the south on the west side of University Avenue. And we are in the same building as the Fairbanks Soil and Water Conservation District. So you get a 2-for-1 if you come visit us. Yes. And that's it for me for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Was there more? Did Jessica want to say any words, or was it just you two gentlemen today?
I think it was just our presentations, but Jessica, if you have something to add, feel free. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think we don't need to put her on the spot. I thank you guys for presenting this information today. It's very good stuff for the folks who are bidders and new farmers to Alaska to engage with you folks. I will remind them that typically the NRCS likes to walk the land to see the resource concerns. So you apparent high bidders, please don't ask them to go out next week because there's snow on the ground. They are not going to see that stuff. You are going to need to create a state farm conservation plan. Working with them, you can always update your plans at a future date. There's a lot of EQIP programs that has some federal cost share. Talk to them about that. Hoop houses, fencing, pond irrigation stuff. They're a wealth of information. You just got to talk to them. Thank you for joining us today. I think that just about concludes our NenTot Tuesday. Next week, we're going to be talking with Mining, Land, and Water about the sale contracts and other questions you might have about that process outside of the farm conservation plan. I don't think I'll be joining, so John Whipple, who's been my assistant these first two, he'll be moderating next week with Mining, Land, and Water. So until then, have a good day. Email me with questions, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.